Captain Parker Sparks didn't think rescuing a stranded jellyfish like Alien would land her in front of the Galactic Council's Department of Xenophores Relations. But here she was, standing stiffly before an insectoid bureaucrat while the floating iridescent creature beside her hummed the Star Wars theme for the third time. To Parker, Bubbles wasn't some exotic species. She was a friend, a companion, maybe even family. Officer Zizklick, Parker said as calmly as she could manage. Bubbles here is not a Class 4 restricted organism. She's my emotional support alien. Zizklick's antennae twitched, their mandibles clicking with bureaucratic irritation. Captain Sparks, there is no such classification as emotional support alien in our current interstellar registry. Well, maybe there should be, Parker muttered, reaching up to gently scratch what she hoped was Bubbles' equivalent of a chin. The alien creature responded with a low, melodic trill that sounded suspiciously like contentment. She floated around Parker's shoulders, translucent tendrils shimmering in pastel blues and greens. Parker couldn't help but grin. She's clearly thriving. Look at her living her best life. 12 of Zizklick's compound eyes all blinked at once, reflecting Parker's face back at her in kaleidoscopic judgment. This is the 8th non-terrestrial companion you've attempted to register this month. 7, actually, Parker corrected. The sentient moss colony decided to live in my shower. Filed for independent citizenship and everything. That is not an improvement, Zizklick replied flatly. Parker shrugged, watching as Bubbles drifted in a lazy circle above her. The jellyfish-like alien was now humming what sounded eerily like Never Gonna Give You Up. You try finding a good emotional support being in deep space, she said, pulling out her datapad. Anyway, I filed all the correct paperwork Form X772 for non-terrestrial companion registration Zone 115 for telepathic potential, and Q999 for creatures who can phase through matter. She phases through matter only when she sneezes, Parker said, matter-of-factly. Technically, she temporarily exists in multiple dimensions at once. It's very convenient for getting through Tsial. Zizklick's mandibles twitched dangerously. Parker knew the signs. The officer was on the verge of an intergalactic paperwork meltdown. But before the lecture on interstellar pet codes could resume, something strange happened. The overhead lights dimmed from sterile white to deep violet. A low-frequency hum reverberated through the walls. Parker glanced up just as Bubbles fell completely silent mid-hum, her colors shifting to a slow, pulsing indigo. That's new, Parker muttered, instinctively reaching out as the alien began to tremble. Then, every screen in the station's registry office flickered to life. Strange symbols appeared, scrolling in gold against black, a language Parker didn't recognize. Zizklick's antennae shot rigid. Impossible, they whispered. These are Guardian glyphs. But those haven't been seen in millennia. Guardian what now? Parker asked, trying to keep her tone casual as Bubbles pressed against her shoulder for comfort. She could feel a faint vibration humming through the alien's body, like a distant choir holding its breath. Zizklick stepped back, mandibles trembling. The Guardians were the first known spacefaring civilization. Legend says they watched over the galaxy before any of us ever left our planets. These symbols, they're warnings about humans. Parker blinked. Us. What could we possibly have done? The screens around the room suddenly synchronized into a unified projection. A hollow voice translated the glyphs aloud, and Parker listened, stunned as it spoke. Warning. Species designation. Human. Exhibits extreme protective behavior toward perceived vulnerable life forms. Will adopt literally anything. Attempts to separate humans from adopted beings may result in retaliation, including but not limited to elaborate rescue operations, clandestine sanctuary networks, and emotionally charged correspondence to governing bodies. The display paused, then added, current known count of human adopted species, 147,000. Rising. Parker couldn't help but chuckle. That actually explains a lot. Zizklick didn't look amused. This is serious, Captain. The glyphs are active. That means you triggered something ancient. Something designed to alert the galaxy about you. Well, technically, about Bubbles, Parker said, nudging her companion gently. The alien responded with a soft beep, then began humming the Jaws theme, as if sensing the rising tension. That was when the doors to the registry room burst open, and a dozen more council officials flooded in. Everyone was talking at once. Some were panicked, others fascinated. But they all had one thing in common: fear. Fear that humans, those warm, sentimental, pet-obsessed humans, might be more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. In the middle of the chaos, Parker stood still. She looked at Bubbles, the strange, adorable, singing jellyfish she'd pulled out of a derelict station just 3 days ago, and thought, this isn't just about paperwork anymore. It never was. 3 days ago, Bubbles had been just another strange creature Parker found floating alone in a forgotten station on the edge of nowhere. Trapped in a stasis field, left behind and humming barely audible tones, the alien being looked lost and harmless. Parker didn't hesitate. She disabled the field and reached out. From that moment, Bubbles never left her side. Now, Parker stood in a secure Galactic Council waiting chamber with her new companion floating above her shoulder, softly cycling through musical renditions of Earth's greatest hits. Currently, it was working through the entire soundtrack of The Little Mermaid. The irony wasn't lost on her. The room was fancy. Sure, soft seats, ambient lighting, but the surveillance devices embedded in every corner reminded her this wasn't a hotel lounge. It was a holding cell with throw pillows. Bubbles didn't seem to mind, spinning slow circles in the air and occasionally emitting the odd tone that reminded Parker of whale song mixed with 1980-second synth. It was then that the doors opened with theatrical drama, and instrode a being Parker had only heard about in diplomatic briefings. Counselor Brax 427. Imagine if a peacock went to law school and overdosed on espresso. Every feather gleamed in regulation-compliant brilliance, and their robes swished as they walked like they were practicing for a runway show on a low-gravity planet. Their entrance would have been majestic, if not for the exact moment Bubbles decided to belt out under the sea. Parker winced. "Shit." Captain O'Malley, Brax 427 said sternly, their voice layered with too many syllables of authority. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I mean, if we're being technical," Parker said, slouching a bit in her seat. "I submitted the registration papers a little late, that's all." "You've activated a dormant, galaxy-wide warning system," the counselor snapped, waving toward the still glowing screens filled with scrolling glyphs. One that was specifically designed to alert the galaxy about humans. That pulled Parker up short. "Wait, back up. You're saying this entire light show is about us?" A holographic projector blinked to life in the center of the room, casting golden text in rotating spheres. As she read the translation aloud, Parker's eyebrows climbed higher and higher. "Warning, species designation, human. Exhibits extreme and often illogical protective behavior toward other life forms, likely to anthropomorphize even inanimate objects. Attempts to remove adopted companions may result in unpredictable and emotionally charged retaliation. Known tactics include dramatic rescue missions, coordinated underground relocation networks, and impassioned political lobbying. Current count of human adopted species, 147,000. Projected increase, exponential. Good luck." "Wow," Parker muttered, glancing at Bubbles, who was now attempting a lazy loop-de-loop around the hologram. "That explains a lot about how First Contact went." "Your first contact," Brax 427 said, feathers bristling, "was when your species met the Kinid Confederation's Elder Council. And your representative's first action was to try and pet our envoy." "In our defense," Parker shrugged, "he looked exactly like a space puppy. We gave him treats. He loved it. That envoy," Brax growled, "still sends Earth Christmas cards." "Ambassador Goodboy," Parker nodded solemnly. "One of the greats. One of the greats." The counselor began to pace, muttering in agitation. "This is precisely the problem. Within one galactic year of contact, your people established over 50 interstellar shelters. You rehabilitated space whales. Space whales, Captain. They're endangered, Parker said, and adorable. Someone had to help them migrate through the asteroid belts. You don't understand the scope of what you've done, Brax said, stopping mid-stride. Your most recent rescue, they gestured toward Bubbles, is not just another lost creature. She's the last known member of the Guardian species. Parker blinked. Excuse me? Our scans confirmed it, Brax continued. She is the final surviving Guardian. You've bonded with a living relic of one of the most ancient and powerful species in galactic history. Bubbles chose that moment to switch her tune to a rather defiant version of I Will Survive. Well, Parker said slowly, watching her companion spin in place like she was doing karaoke with attitude. That explains the musical talent. The counselor didn't laugh. This is exactly why the Council has voted to implement Protocol 47B, immediate separation of all non-native creatures from human custody, starting with her. Parker's smile went cold. I'm sorry, she said in a tone that was both polite and dangerously calm. You want to do what now? It is not up for debate, Brax said flatly. The Council's decision is final. No, Parker interrupted, standing to her full height, her posture suddenly military straight. You don't understand. She took a step forward. Bubbles hovered protectively behind her, humming the Imperial March. Humanity has spent its entire existence protecting the weak. We build rooms our homes for lizards. We cry over hamsters. We will risk our lives for stray cats in the rain. You try to take our companions away from us. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That's not a diplomatic incident. That's a war declaration. Brax 427's feathers twitched, and for the first time, they looked nervous. It started with an announcement. One cold, clipped, emotionless broadcast from the Galactic Council, echoed across every inhabited station and relay in known space, effective immediately. All non-terrestrial life forms currently in human custody are to be surrendered. This action falls under Protocol 47B, authorized for the preservation of galactic order. Captain Parker Sparks read it twice, then a third time. Each repetition only sharpened the absurdity of it all. Take away the pets, the emotional support companions, the rescued, the rehabilitated, the rehomed? From humans? The Council had no idea what they'd just triggered. Bubbles, her floating, shimmering jellyfish-like companion, hummed a low melodic tone from across the room, something between Mission Impossible and Duel of the Fates. Appropriate, Parker thought grimly. The temperature in the station seemed to drop by several degrees as her gut twisted with something ancient and instinctive. This wasn't about regulations anymore. This was about family, and every human who had ever looked into the eyes of a misunderstood alien creature and whispered, "Don't worry, I've got you now." They felt it too. Parker's communicator buzzed violently. Messages began pouring in from every human companion owner across the sector. Doctors, miners, mechanics, even soldiers. They weren't asking for orders. They were reporting in. Operation Paw Patrol had begun. She clicked open a priority message from Dr. Mira Patel, a xenobiologist on Europa who ran a sanctuary for what she lovingly referred to as misunderstood space monsters. Her voice was tight, trembling with rage. Sparks, they tried to take Mr. Snuggles. Parker blinked. The Void Beast. Yes, Mira hissed. Do you know how long it took me to convince him to respond to Mr. Snuggles? And now the Council's enforcement team is trapped in a pocket dimension. I warned them he gets cranky if he misses his afternoon walk. Parker exhaled slowly. Is he okay? Oh, he's fine, Mira growled. They're not. More pings. Tommy Chen, the teenager who taught a pack of silicon-based creatures to play fetch, had rerouted the station's entire communication grid with help from his crystal dogs. Every screen now played an endless loop of animal rescue stories and cute alien peep videos. Bubbles floated back to Parker's side, her glow now a steady blue. We need to move, Parker muttered, standing, before they get smart. She reached for her gear. Just as Officer Zizklik, yes, that Zizklik came skittering into the chamber. But instead of hostility, their mandibles clicked with urgency. "Wait, don't run." Parker narrowed her eyes. "I assumed you were here to arrest me." Zizklik's antennae twitched side to side. "The council doesn't understand. They see records. I see reality. I've processed thousands of human pet registrations. I've seen what your kind does for these creatures." Parker raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you're with us?" The insectoid officer hesitated, then nodded. "I have 7 human rehabilitated arthropodan silk spinners living in my quarters. They make web art. I love them." It wasn't said with drama. It was stated like fact, like truth. Zizklik stepped closer, lowering their voice. "There are maintenance tunnels, not in the schematics. They lead to the private docks. I may have accidentally processed emergency travel permits for several dozen of your people in the last hour." From behind her shoulder, Bubbles played a soft, warm tune, "You've Got a Friend in Me." Parker couldn't help but smile. Zizklik led them through a hidden panel. The corridor beyond was dim, narrow, and alive with quiet movement. All around her were humans with their companions. Some clutched strange, glowing creatures. Some had telepathic slugs wrapped around their arms. One woman had a levitating cactus that blinked whenever it was nervous. The council had just declared war on the most dangerous force in the galaxy, humans who had formed emotional bonds. As they crept deeper, Parker caught sight of a familiar flicker in the walls. Glowing glyphs, guardians' symbols, not warnings this time. They were shifting, aligning into legible patterns. Directions, schematics, escape routes. And then, activation codes. Bubbles spun midair and pulsed brighter than ever. A deep hum filled the space. Protocol Omega initiated blinked across every exposed surface. The Guardian Defense Network had awakened. Zizklik froze. "This is real. It's not a myth." Bubbles answered with a triumphant blast of "We will rock you," her light scattering through the tunnel like sunlight through stained glass. "They prepared for this," Parker whispered. "They knew someone would try to stop people from protecting the weak, and they left us the tools to fight back." The station rumbled faintly beneath their feet. Somewhere above, alarms wailed. The council was deploying reinforcements. But this time, the resistance wasn't ragtag. It was organized. Frederick the carnivorous alien vine was now banging a gavel in what had become an underground command center, chaired by a retired librarian and filled with humans and their beloved alien pets. Plans were drawn. Access routes were mapped. The emergency meeting of the Intergalactic Pet Parents Association was underway. "We're not surrendering them," Parker said firmly as her communicator blinked with a message from Mira. "Red teams incoming. Mr. Snuggles is stretching. We're ready." This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was a movement. By the time Parker and Bubbles reached the converted maintenance bay that now served as a command center, the war over pets had become something much bigger. What started as a chaotic scramble to protect alien companions had transformed into an organized resistance, hundreds of humans, each with their own unique non-terrestrial partner, all unified by a single unshakable truth. You don't take pets away from humans. Not without consequences. The old storage room now buzzed with energy. Makeshift terminals displayed live feeds of the station's systems. Encrypted comm lines relayed updates from every quadrant, and a surprising number of aliens, former skeptics, current sympathizers, stood shoulder to shoulder with the humans. At the head of it all stood Barbara Watson, a retired librarian now in charge of the Intergalactic Pet Parents Association's emergency session. Beside her sat Frederick, her carnivorous alien vine companion, who dutifully tapped a gavel using one of his tendrils. His leaf tips glowed with a faint pink hue, which Parker had come to learn meant focused but slightly anxious. Barbara called the room to order, her voice calm but commanding. First item on the agenda, status reports. Dr. Patel. Mira stood, her tablet casting a greenish light across her face. Operation Paw Patrol is holding, she reported. With Officer Zizklik's help and a growing number of sympathetic station staff, We've successfully evacuated 73% of registered human companion pairs to safe zones. A round of relieved murmurs echoed through the room. The bad news, Mira added with a grimace, is that the council's brought in the red teams. A groan rippled across the room. Even Frederick gave a low, unhappy rustle. Parker had heard of them. The red teams were the council's elite enforcement division, ruthlessly by the book, devoid of humor and infamous for their total obedience to the letter of intergalactic law. They weren't soldiers. They were weaponized bureaucrats. "But we've got something they don't," came a voice from the back. It was Tommy Chen, barely 16, bouncing a glowing crystal ball between his hands while his silicon-based dogs wagged beside him, tails clicking against the floor. "We've got love," he grinned. "And also Mr. Snuggles. He's planning something." The room chuckled nervously, though no one doubted Mr. Snuggles was indeed planning something. The Void Beast had proven to be disturbingly competent at tactical mischief. "I need to add something," Parker said, stepping forward. The room quieted as she detailed what she'd learned. That Bubbles wasn't just a cute, humming, multi-dimensional alien. She was the last known Guardian, and the ancient species hadn't left warnings about humanity. They'd built a legacy for them. The activation of the Guardian Defense Network wasn't a fluke. It was a handoff, a trust passed between civilizations. By the time she finished, the room had gone completely silent. Then Barbara, with tears gleaming in her eyes, looked at Bubbles, who was now gently spinning midair, a soft light emanating from her translucent body. "So you're telling me," Barbara said softly, "that the most powerful civilization in the galaxy left their defense systems, their escape routes, and their wisdom to us?" Officer Zizklik, standing by the door, answered in her place. "The Guardians were protectors. They once relocated an entire solar system just because a planet had particularly adorable microbial life. From what I've seen, humans, you're the same." Before anyone could reply, Parker's comm chirped. A live transmission blinked into existence in the center of the room. Brax 427's face appeared, feathers fluffed, voice forced into a tone of thinly veiled authority. "This resistance is futile," Brax declared. "Red teams are stationed at all major ports. Transportation hubs are locked down. That ridiculous Earth-built station shaped like a fire hydrant has been impounded. You have 1 hour to surrender all non-terrestrial creatures." Someone in the back scoffed. "The hydrant is a research facility. For zero-G fetch." Parker ignored them, eyes narrowing as she studied Brax's face. The council wasn't bluffing. They were escalating. But before anyone could panic, Bubbles pulsed a soft blue and drifted to the center of the room. Her glow intensified, and Symbol's guardian glyphs appeared again. This time, they weren't just warnings or ancient code. They were schematics. Officer Zizklik stepped forward, antenna twitching. These are control systems. Environmental, security, transportation, every system in the sector. And look, Mira gasped, pointing to the golden highlights on the hologram. They've all got override paths. Parker's pulse quickened. The Guardians didn't just leave us defenses. They left options, escape tunnels, backup power routes, even sanctuary locations. They built a galaxy-wide backdoor. Barbara whispered in awe, just in case someone tried to stop protectors from doing their job. Bubbles floated upward, the hologram pulsing to her rhythm. Then, with perfect timing, she broke the silence with the opening bars of "Break Free" by Queen. It was all the confirmation they needed. The resistance wasn't scrambling anymore. Now they had purpose, direction, and a literal user manual from an extinct super-civilization guiding them every step of the way. The battle for the heart of the galaxy wasn't going to be fought with weapons. It would be fought with kindness, creativity, and stubborn, ridiculous human love. And they were ready. The council thought they had the upper hand. With red teams deployed, transport hubs locked down, and every major spaceport under surveillance, it looked like checkmate. But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that they weren't just up against humans. They were up against pet parents. Bubbles hovered in the center of the repurposed command room, glowing like a miniature sun. As her radiance intensified, the air itself seemed to vibrate. Ancient Guardian symbols spiraled outward into a vast 3D projection, mapping every station, ship, and installation across the sector. It wasn't just a tactical overlay. It was a gift left behind by a civilization that had loved deeply and protected fiercely. And now, that legacy had passed to humanity. "These are just schematics," Officer Zisklik said, voice trembling with awe. "They're full-access controls, every environmental system, every locked chamber, even fail-safes buried beneath multiple layers of Council encryption." Mira Patel leaned in closer, eyes scanning the data. "They're highlighting environmental parameters. All of them are calibrated to non-terrestrial comfort levels. Ventilation, lighting, temperature. It's like the Guardians anticipated someone trying to tear families apart," Parker finished. She stepped forward, eyes locked on the golden-lit escape corridors and safe zones embedded throughout every structure in known space. "And they built a contingency." Bubbles floated higher and, for the first time since she'd activated the network, went completely silent. The projection slowed, then shifted now, showing corridors through which energy pulsed, marking safe passage for human companion pairs. Barbara Watson adjusted her glasses, then looked at her Vine companion Frederick, who tapped the gavel twice as if confirming what everyone was already thinking. "They didn't just warn the galaxy about us," Barbara said. "They prepared the galaxy for us." Parker couldn't help but grin. The Guardians knew one day someone would come along, someone just as stubbornly protective as they were. Just then, her communicator buzzed. Another live transmission. Brax 427 again, but this time, their feathers were practically vibrating with frustration. "Captain Sparks, this resistance is a violation of Council law. You've interfered with active enforcement operations. You've compromised critical infrastructure. And you've weaponized Jellyfish." "Correction," Parker said cheerfully. "She's the one doing all this. I'm just along for the ride." Behind her, Bubbles spun in a slow, satisfied circle, then chimed the opening notes of "We Are the Champions." The room erupted in laughter, but Parker saw the tension behind it. Everyone understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about pet ownership anymore. It was about autonomy, about care, about what it meant to choose compassion over control. As the Council doubled down on its enforcement efforts, something remarkable began to unfold. Tommy Chen's crystal dogs had completely overtaken the station's security feed, replacing it with a non-stop loop of Alien Pete videos and feel-good human rescue stories. Mira's space monster sanctuary had turned into a fortified safe zone, defended by rehabilitated void beasts who snarled politely at any Council drone that got too close. Professor Williams' reformed space pirate crew, once considered a liability, now ran a smuggling network moving endangered species into safe haven. Even the most elite Red Team squads were faltering. They weren't trained to handle coordinated affection. They weren't prepared for alien creatures to cry when separated from their humans. And they definitely weren't ready for the emotionally charged wave of guilt that came with confiscating something that clung to its person and made sad noises that sounded like children's lullabies. Then came the breaking point. In the heart of the sector, the station built by humans to resemble a fire hydrant, originally a joke, later a fully functioning research facility, went dark. The Council had seized it, locked down its systems, and declared it neutralized, until it lit up again, in every shade of neon pink. The override had been triggered remotely. A song blared across its comms, Bubbles doing, no doubt, and the lyrics were unmistakable. "Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough." It was the anthem of the rebellion. And in that moment, ships began to arrive. Thousands. Some were sleek interstellar crafts. Others were cobbled together cargo freighters. A few looked like flying homes, complete with wind chimes and plants in the windows. But every single one carried someone human or alien who had loved and been loved by a creature the galaxy tried to take away. They weren't here to fight. They were here to stand. The Galactic Council's comms were instantly flooded diplomatic protests, legal appeals, emotional testimonials. The sheer weight of it overwhelmed every system they had. Entire species that had once stayed neutral were now speaking out. Even a few Red Team officers caught on hidden feeds were quietly releasing creatures they couldn't bear to separate from. And then quietly, unceremoniously, one of the Red Team commanders stepped forward on a shared feed, holding up a tiny fluff ball with 8 blinking eyes and glowing ears. "This is Squeakers," they said softly. "A human helped me rescue her during the quantum storms. I'm not giving her up." One by one, others followed, sharing their stories, their companions, their truth. The Council had tried to control the narrative. Instead, they'd sparked a revolution. And at the center of it all floated a humming, glowing being the galaxy once called extinct, now quietly projecting warmth, love, and defiance in the form of perfect pitch and musical nostalgia. Bubbles began playing "My Heart Will Go On," and not a single eye in the room stayed dry. The Council thought protocol was enough, that rules cold, rigid, and absolute could contain a species like humanity. They failed to understand one essential truth. When you threaten someone's family, you're not issuing a policy change. You're lighting a match beside a fuel tank. And for humans, alien or not, a companion is family. Parker could feel the shift happening in real time. It wasn't just scattered resistance anymore. It was momentum, quiet, relentless, and building. They were no longer just dodging Red Teams. They were rewriting the map. She followed Officer Zizklick through a dim maintenance tunnel carved beneath the docking levels. It smelled faintly of machine oil and dust, but the corridor pulsed with life. Not just from the pipes overhead or the hum of emergency lights, but from the people. Humans had come in droves, each with a companion by their side. Parker saw a girl no older than 10 gently cradling a translucent creature with 6 limbs and oversized eyes. Beside her stood a man with a lizard the size of a Labrador curled around his shoulders like a scarf. Some beings glowed. Some clicked. Some floated. But all had one thing in common. They weren't going anywhere without their human. And their humans had no intention of letting them go. Zuzklick stopped suddenly, antennae standing at attention. "Captain," they said quietly, "we're not alone." Up ahead in the tight bend of the corridor was a gathering. At first glance, it looked chaotic. Dozens of people with all manner of alien companions filling the narrow space. But as they stepped closer, Parker saw something extraordinary. The walls were glowing. Guardian glyphs danced across the surfaces, etched in light, shifting gently as if breathing. And they weren't warnings this time. They were blueprints, messages, activations. Parker reached out. Her fingers hovered near the wall, and the glyphs shifted again, translating automatically into Galactic Common. Protocol Omega initiated. Guardian Defense Network activated. Emergency compassion corridors engaged. Bubbles drifted forward, her glow syncing with the patterns on the wall. Then, softly, she began to play. "Don't Stop Believin'," slow and hopeful, her tone warm enough to melt the tension from everyone around. "This," Zizklick whispered, stepping back as more glyphs appeared above them, forming a glowing halo overhead. "This is the stuff of myths. The Guardian Network wasn't supposed to be real." "Oh, it's real," Parker said. "And I think it's been waiting for us." The walls around them trembled slightly, and then the floor below shifted, revealing hidden steps leading deeper into the station. Golden lights guided the way, illuminating what looked like a passage carved directly into the ancient infrastructure, old, long forgotten, and untouched by the Council's regulations. The air down there was different. Cooler, older, and the symbols kept coming. As they walked, more people joined the procession. It wasn't just one station anymore, word had spread. Across dozens of worlds and orbital platforms, humans and their alien companions were finding similar tunnels, hidden schematics, dormant networks suddenly coming alive after millennia of silence. The Guardian systems weren't being hacked. They were being welcomed. Each tunnel led somewhere meaningful. A safe dock, An unmonitored escape corridor, a control room with manual overrides. Every path was part of something massive and interconnected, a failsafe left behind not to enforce power, but to preserve kindness, to protect what mattered. And humanity, in all their chaotic, stubborn empathy, had been chosen to activate it. They emerged into a hidden chamber, vast and domed, with an ancient guardian console at the center. Bubbles floated ahead of them, light shimmering in every hue of the visible spectrum. The moment she touched the console, the entire room bloomed with radiant light. Holographic displays filled the space, showing not just the station they were in, but every station in the sector. And on each one, the same phrase blinked into being: Guardian Override active. Operation Forever Home in progress. Parker exhaled slowly. They didn't just believe in us. They planned for us. Zizklik looked up at the projections in awe. You humans, you form bonds faster than any species we've ever encountered. The Guardians must have seen that, understood that your instincts weren't a weakness, but a strength. Parker watched the displays as reports poured in. Evacuated shelters, rescued species, transport ships rerouted through hidden Guardian channels. The Resistance had evolved beyond survival. It was becoming a sanctuary network, organized, defended, unstoppable. The red teams were now scattered and confused. The Council's efforts to control the chaos were being overwhelmed, not by firepower, but by logistics. Every enforcement action they took was met by dozens of countermeasures: surprise evacuations, lockdown overrides, even full-on environmental reprogramming that turned detention bays into tropical sanctuaries for aquatic creatures. And it was all happening under their noses. At the heart of it all, Parker stood quietly. She looked at Bubbles, this tiny, iridescent being who had once been trapped in stasis and forgotten by time, and saw the reason why it was all working. They weren't fighting for a system. They were fighting with one, an ancient one, built on love. There was something poetic about how it all unraveled. The Galactic Council had poured every ounce of its bureaucratic might into breaking the human-companion bond. Protocol 47B wasn't just a policy anymore. It had become a mission. Council members called it a humanitarian intervention. Parker called it what it really was: a declaration of war on compassion. But the Council wasn't fighting rebels or insurgents. They were fighting dog moms and lizard dads. They were trying to uproot families that had been stitched together across species, across worlds, built not through blood, but through kindness. And in doing so, they'd underestimated the most powerful force in the galaxy: a bunch of people who loved too hard and refused to let go. Bubbles had stopped playing music. She hovered silently now in the center of the command chamber, glowing brighter than ever. Her light pulsed in slow, deliberate intervals. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't even angry. She was focused. As the last Guardian, she carried within her not just memories, but systems, tools, maps, and failsafes encoded into her very being. Her silence wasn't withdrawal. It was work. She was interfacing with the Guardian Defense Network directly, updating its protocols, activating dormant systems across the stars. And everyone could feel the shift. Counselor Brax 427's latest transmission had been cut off mid-threat, overridden by a sector-wide Guardian broadcast. The Council's communications now played an endlessly looping video of rescued alien creatures sleeping peacefully in human arms. Even the most hardened officials were starting to look uncomfortable. Back in the command center, Parker stood next to Officer Zizklik, reviewing the newest schematics projected on the wall. These override routes, they're everywhere, Zizklik said, voice laced with disbelief. Stations, ships, even remote planetary outposts. The Guardians hardwired emergency compassion corridors into nearly every critical infrastructure node in the quadrant. And we've only activated about a third of them, Parker said. The rest are still waiting. For what? Zizklik asked, antennae twitching. Parker didn't need to answer, because just then, Bubbles moved again. She drifted upward, glowing like a tiny sun, and for the first time since activating the network, she began to project more than code. Images burst across the wall's memories. Not Parker's, Not human. Guardian memories. The room went still. They saw a time long before humanity walked the stars, an age when the Guardians wandered the galaxy, not to conquer, but to nurture. They watched as entire ecosystems were moved to protect fragile creatures, as species were rehabilitated, as conflicts were resolved not through weapons, but through warmth and understanding. Then came the Guardians' final act, the creation of the defense network, built in secret. Not to fight wars, but to outlast extinction. To make sure that if one day a species arose with the same compulsive need to care, the system would recognize them and respond. And it had. Parker stepped forward, her throat tight. They weren't warning the galaxy about us, she said softly. They were waiting for us. Behind her, Frederick, the sentient vine who had appointed himself the meeting's gavel wielder, gently tapped the table once. No words needed. This wasn't a rebellion anymore. It was a succession. Humans hadn't just stumbled into the Guardian network. They'd been chosen by it. Validated by every act of over-the-top, irrational, deeply human love they had ever shown to a creature in need. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, because that's when the Council arrived. The chamber shook as Council vessels docked above the station. The red teams deployed with clinical precision, marching in synchronized lines, scanners at the ready. But they weren't prepared for what they walked into. The moment the override reached full capacity, the entire station shifted. Environmental controls recalibrated to optimal creature comfort. Gravity softened to excited puppy mode. Security systems rerouted to display calming imagery of purring creatures and slow-moving jellyfish. The red team squads found themselves unable to walk in straight lines, slipping across freshly waxed floors while the station's intercom blared a melancholic version of My Heart Will Go On. One officer tripped and fell into a cuddled pile of furry creatures. No one helped him up. Instead, he sighed deeply and stayed there. Brax 427 stormed into the council chamber, feathers frizzed and eyes wild. "What have you done?" Parker stood calmly, bubbles hovering beside her like a musical moon. "We didn't do anything," she said. "Shh. You triggered all of this when you tried to take them from us." "And now," added Barbara Watson, appearing behind Parker with Frederick perched proudly on her shoulder, "you get to live in the world the Guardians left behind, one where compassion wins." The Council's arguments collapsed under the weight of their own contradictions. Red Team commanders began resigning mid-mission. Enforcement officers revealed secret alien pets they'd been hiding in lockers and uniforms. One even held up a datapad with a picture of a tiny, round creature named Squeakers. "She's family," the officer whispered. "I won't give her up." When the final vote came, it wasn't even close. Protocol 47B was suspended indefinitely, not because it was unlawful, but because no one wanted to enforce it anymore. In the end, it wasn't the weapons or the network overrides that changed the Council's mind. It was tears. Not human tears, surprisingly. It was Bubbles floating quietly in the center of the Galactic Council's grand chamber, glowing dimmer than anyone had seen before. She didn't speak. She didn't hum. She just cried, not with water, but with light, gentle sparkles that drifted down like stardust. Each one pulsing with the quiet heartbreak of being told she couldn't stay with her human. The Council had made their position clear. All non-terrestrial creatures were to be surrendered. Red Team stood ready to seize them. Enforcement cruisers hovered outside the station. Bureaucrats adjusted their robes and prepared their speeches. And then Bubbles played the saddest possible version of My Heart Will Go On. Soft, broken, vulnerable. The entire chamber fell silent. Even Brax 427, who had been the loudest proponent of Protocol 47B, froze. Their feathers drooped. They opened their beak to argue, but no sound came out. "Oh no," someone muttered in the back. "She's doing the music thing again." A heartbeat later, Bubbles shifted keys. "This time, it was all by myself. performed in a slow, mournful trill that made everyone in the room look away embarrassed, not by the song, but by the lump forming in their throats. "She's sad," Zizklik said quietly, as if it was the most terrifying realization of all. "She's heartbroken," Parker corrected, stepping forward. "And so is every creature you're trying to take from us." Brax tried to gather their composure. This is emotional manipulation." "Absolutely," Barbara chimed in through the comms. "And it's working. And it's working." Laughter broke through the tension. It wasn't loud or mocking, it was the sound of something cracking open. Something long sealed shut behind protocol and procedure. Behind control. One of the Red Team commanders stepped forward. In their gloved hand, they held a photo, a blurry, clearly personal image of a ball of fluff with far too many tentacles and far too few bones. "This is Squeakers," they said softly. "I rescued her with a human during the quantum storms. She sleeps in my boots, and if you think I'm giving her up, you've officially lost your minds." The dam broke. One by one, others followed. They pulled photos from pockets, produced tiny creatures from uniform compartments. One officer revealed a glowing insect nestled in their helmet. Another shyly let a feathered creature crawl out from their backpack and perch on their shoulder, chirping anxiously. They weren't just humans anymore. They were just bureaucrats, or security officers, or planetary delegates. They were pet owners, and they were done pretending otherwise. The council chamber devolved into chaos, but not the bad kind. It was the chaos of rethinking everything, of seeing not enemies, but shared love. Across the sector, council feeds were flooded with stories, videos, declarations. Please, please, please. They weren't just coming from Earth either. Aliens who had once been neutral were now openly speaking out. Creatures rescued by humans who had learned trust and safety from unexpected places now refused to be silent. Some appeared in person. Others broadcast messages. A few just showed up and stood beside their humans in quiet solidarity. Then the fleet arrived. The fleet arrived. Thousands of ships, human vessels, alien crafts, cobbled together freighters painted with hand-drawn paw prints emerged from hyperspace. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't jam comms. They just floated there, unified by one cause. You do not take Amelie. The council, outmaneuvered and emotionally overwhelmed, attempted one last push. We must maintain order, Brax insisted weakly. There has to be regulation. Yes, Parker agreed. But the kind that protects, not separates. At that moment, Officer Zizklik let out a long, reverent breath. The Guardians, they didn't just protect. They taught. One of the council scientists leaned forward, scanning the data. This isn't folklore. It's field-tested xenobiology. This could revolutionize our understanding of behavior science, healing, even diplomacy. Barbara smiled. Or we could just use it to make sure Mr. Snuggles gets his walks on time. There was a moment of silence, and then Brax, shoulders slumped, feathers dull, muttered, "Fine. Protocol 47B is suspended, pending review." "Amendments," Parker said pointedly. Brax sighed. "Amendments." Barbara leaned into the comm. "How about we start with the fact that half your red teams are closet pet owners?" The red team commander gave a resigned shrug. "Guilty." And just like that, everything began to shift. 3 weeks later, Parker sat back in Officer Zizklik's office, this time not as a fugitive, but as the newly appointed head of the Interstellar Animal Welfare and Protection Service. Outside the window, construction on the galaxy's first zero-gravity dog park was underway. Inside, Bubbles was humming Hakuna Matata, while entertaining a group of newly registered space pets. "You understand," Zizklik said, stamping Parker's final form, "that your role as the human liaison to the Guardian Legacy Division makes you responsible for implementing these care regulations across the sector." "As long as I get to keep Bubbles," Parker replied, watching her companion dance midair with a tiny three-eyed kitten. Zizklik clicked their mandibles in amusement. "According to Guardian records, you don't have a choice. When a guardian chooses a human, it's permanent. Parker laughed softly. Cosmic adoption, cosmic forever home, Zizclick corrected. And as the room filled with soft music and laughter, Parker looked out at the future they were building, one forged not through conquest or control, but through love. They used to say the Guardians were gone extinct, vanished, little more than a myth wrapped in ancient tech and half-remembered songs. But they were wrong. The Guardians hadn't disappeared. They'd been waiting. Waiting for a species reckless enough to care about everything. Foolish enough to build sanctuaries before fortresses. Determined enough to protect the weak even when it made no tactical sense. And sentimental enough to build a space station shaped like a fire hydrant just because the first alien they ever rescued looked like a puppy. That species was human. And now everyone in the galaxy knew it. The Guardian warning still scrolls across data systems from time to time. Only now, it carries an addendum: quiet, efficient, and utterly undeniable. Update. Humans have been officially designated as the galaxy's pet sitters. Resistance is futile. They will find you, and they will pet you. Parker stood in the observation deck of the Guardian Coordination Center, formerly a repurposed council bureaucracy wing, now draped in vines, ambient lighting, and the occasional hammock for comfort creatures. The walls pulsed gently with Guardian glyphs, not as warnings, but as invitations glowing maps of care, trust, and connection. Bubbles floated at her side, gently swaying in rhythm with the station's ambient hum. Today, she was glowing gold, a good sign. "I think we're ready," Parker said. Officer Zizclick, now Director of Interstellar Companion Affairs, tapped a few controls, bringing up the live feed. Across the sector, stations were opening their doors. Shelters were being established in every system, and the once feared red teams, now reorganized as the Pet Emergency Response Division, specializing in alien rescue, cuddle-based conflict de-escalation, and interdimensional relocation. Their first major assignment: constructing the galaxy's largest zero-gravity dog park, out in the Kyre Belt. Mr. Snuggles, the once feared void beast, was running a surprisingly effective therapy program for war-traumatized bioweapons. His staff included reformed pirate parrots, 2 psionic jellyfish, and a sentient puddle named Marvin. And on Europa, Mira Patel had expanded her misunderstood space monster sanctuary to 5 domes and counting. She now offered guided tours, adoption services, and free biscuits for any being with more than 4 eyes. "This never should have worked," Zizclick said, staring at the screen, shaking their head in disbelief. "You're not diplomats. You're not soldiers. You're just people who love weird stuff with too many limbs," Parker smiled. Zizclick's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Exactly." They watched in silence for a moment as a small pod landed in the sanctuary courtyard. A child stepped out, holding the tentacle of a creature twice their size, both looking around with wide-eyed awe. The creature wagged its tail, or something close to it, and wrapped a limb gently around the child's shoulders. "You know," Parker said, "I used to think we were the chaos in the galaxy, the unpredictable element." "We are," Zizclick replied. "But maybe," she continued, "that's exactly. It had been music. It had been a guardian crying softly in public. It had been the way a void beast refused to let go of the scientist who first gave him a name. It had been every human who'd ever said, 'Oh my God, it's so ugly, I love it,' and meant it. That was the secret the Guardians had recognized all along. That empathy wasn't a weakness. It was an anchor. It created bonds that didn't care about species or language. Bonds that turned chaos into community, fear into healing. I wonder if the Guardians are still out there somewhere," Parker murmured, watching. Zizclick's antennae twitched thoughtfully. "If they are, I think they're proud." Bubbles floated up to the ceiling then, casting a shimmering light down over the chamber. A Guardian message appeared on the wall. "Legacy confirmed. Guardian role fulfilled. Designation: forever home achieved." Parker swallowed the lump in her throat. "You know, she said softly. When I found her, I just thought I was saving a jellyfish. She thought the same thing, Zizclick replied. Bubbles floated down beside her and began to hum again. This time, it was Circle of Life, but not as a joke. It was reverent, almost holy. And as the melody filled the room, Parker felt something shift in the universe, not an explosion or a rupture, but a rebalancing, as if somewhere in the infinite, the original Guardians were watching and smiling. Yes, she thought, these ones. These are the ones who will keep them safe. Even if they do give everything silly names, especially then,